You're listening to the More Sunsets Please podcast, episode 4.
This was something that for me made me almost not want to do it. So there's a lot of emphasis on free range parenting and homeschooling. And I feel like if you don't feel like you fit in that box where, you're off on hikes every single day and your little kids are running way up ahead of you, or you're getting to climb mountains and do all these outdoorsy things, then you don't necessarily fit into that community. Well, that's not really us, so maybe we shouldn't really be out there doing that.
Welcome to the More Sunsets Please podcast. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to live debt-free, sell it all and live small, travel the country full-time, or raising animals and growing your own food as a sustainable family? My name is Kate, and these are just some of the stories of those who have jumped outside the box and living life on their terms. This is More Sunsets Please.
Welcome, Sarah, to the More Sunsets Please podcast. I'm so happy to have you here.
I am glad to be here.
Awesome. So first, can you let us know where are you at right now?
We are about an hour outside San Diego.
Let us know just a little background on your story. Where have you guys been? Where have you explored?
So in 2019, we had a family reunion planned, and we lived in San Diego, and it was all the way in Massachusetts. And we really wanted to go, but we have 2 autistic boys, and we thought there is just no way they're going to make it on an airplane. So I went and bought a $1,400 camper. It was filthy, bed bug infested, super gross. And I had a year, and I told my husband, I said, I'm going to fix this up so we can use it. And he was like, that needs to be pushed off a cliff. That's horrible. So we fixed it up, and we spent so much time on it, and we made it pretty nice. And we piled all 10 of us into the RV, and we drove to Massachusetts and back in 14 days. And my daughter had to be at camp on the 14th day back in San Diego. So we drove, we really moved, but we were able to get through our family reunion. And on the way back, we did Niagara Falls, and we had done some really neat stuff on the way, and we were kind of hooked at that point. So we got back to San Diego, and we still had a house at that point we were renting. And we thought, you know what, let's get a little bit of a bigger RV. So we sold our fixer-upper, and we bought a travel trailer that was a little bit bigger. And then the pandemic happened. And so everything in California kind of shut down in March of 2020, and we had paid something like $450,000 in rent to our house over the course of I think 8 years, a lot of money. So we were paying a lot in rent, and we had a really not good landlord tenant situation. You would think an expensive house would give you a nicer situation, but it didn't. So we were kind of hitting the wall. Everything kind of worked out to where we had just gotten this a nicer bunkhouse travel trailer, and our lease was ending, and we already were homeschooling, and we just felt like, you know what, let's move out of the rental and we'll go travel around and do full-time RV life. And so we did the same thing. We spent the probably April, May, June, all of July trying to get downsized, which I'm sure it's a huge process, and it took a long time. And then we were remodeling our travel trailer. So as soon as we had finished remodeling our travel trailer, we kind of stood back and we were like, we're not going to fit in this. It's one thing to be a weekender with 10 people, but then when we started looking at where everybody was going to sleep, because your kids get so much bigger, a year doesn't seem like a lot, but in a year you kind of look, and I have teenagers. And so we were kind of they're not going to fit in this. So we were well, let's look at a fifth wheel. Let's see what we could get for cash. And we found less than 2 miles from us the exact bunkhouse camper that we were looking for. We were looking for one that could sleep all 8 kids in the bunk room. And so we just happened, it was right there, and it just seemed to work out perfect. So that's what we have now. And we hit the road full time in September of 2020. And we drove we kind of took the long way, and we drove around and saw some sights. And then we got to North Carolina, and we were going to stay there through Christmas. And we ended up staying there quite a bit longer, and we bought an investment property there. So we started fixing that up. And then we hit the road again in, oh my gosh, I think February of 2022. we've had some long, I don't even know. We've had some long extended road trips that we've gone on, but we've been back and forth across the country like probably 3 or 4 times now. So we took the longest one that we've been on. We went from North Carolina, went all the way down through Florida, San Diego. We spent some time in Texas. Our van died in Texas. We got a new van in Texas. It died at the Alamo, right there, it just died. And we went to Glacier National Park, and we spent a few weeks in Minnesota, which we really liked. And then we went back to North Carolina for about 2 months, and then we came back out to the Southern California, and we're out here until June. So that's where we are. We're enjoying this period of being stationary. It's actually been really, really nice. I'm enjoying this.
Oh, good. And then, so being stationary is literally you're parked in one spot, not moving at all.
Yeah.
Staying put. And how long have you been staying put again?
So we got here the last week of November, and we're here until the first week of June-ish, give or take. And then we have some little short trips kind of in between, but we have a long-term spot here, which is nice to, and our kids, they went back to public school here while we're stationary. So that's kind of been nice for them because they've been homeschooled for so long. And so especially our older kids are really enjoying being back in school. So it's been nice. It's just the first time I haven't had any kids home since like 2005. So it's been a long time in my.
That's almost 18 years.
Yeah, this is the first time since I had my son. So my oldest is in college this year. He left for college. So we have one less kid around here than we did before. So that's it's been fun.
So how many kids are you traveling with right now, or traveling
7.
with, living with?
7.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. And you guys all fit in one RV.
We do. We have a 8-bed bunk room. We have a double slide out bunk room. So we have bunks on each side, and then we have beds in the center.
Oh, that's smart.
So toy haulers, a lot of people think that the toy haulers are the biggest and can hold the most, but that's not actually true. The ones that hold the most are the unicorn campers, and there's a handful of them out there that have that like double slide out bunk room. So that's the only way that we fit.
Why did you start this life? Why did this make sense for you guys, or your reasoning for RV life?
So for us, our primary reason wasn't really to travel, although travel was a bonus. Our primary reason was that we were kind of done renting, and we didn't really, especially given the timing in California, we weren't really sure that we wanted to stay in California. Like we had a lot of reasons that everything at the time that we moved, everything was shut down. Like you could go to the beach, but you couldn't sit on the beach. You had to just walk on the beach. You could not go, like you could walk at a park, you could run at a park, but you couldn't use the playground equipment. And so we didn't have a yard in California. And so we had a pool and we lived on like a golf course, but no like yard. So after like 3 months of not being able to even go to the playground and our lease coming up, we were just kind of done. But the reason that RV life works for us is because for our 2 autistic boys, they have a really hard time being in new places. So hotels are really difficult to take them in. And for them, the RV is just home, and they have the same bed every night, and they have the same layout all the time. So no matter where we go, they always have that kind of like continuity. And they do really well, traveling, and they do fine in the car. But like the sleeping situation, if we were to do hotels or anything else like that, new houses, things, they have a really hard time making those transitions to a new thing. So RV life works out really well for us because we're able to, travel, but still give them that stability that they need.
Now, how did you know once you hit the road or moved into the RV that you knew this was the right path?
That's a good question. So we kind of got our learning curve out of the way on our first like maiden voyage. Like, there's always that adjustment period where it's really, really hard and things break and go wrong. So I feel like our first road trip that we took across country, where, Cam and I had never done, neither one of us had ever traveled in an RV. And RV was so small and so old, and there were so many of us, and we were kind of learning along the way. Like we learned everything. Like we learned kind of the hard way that you need the water pressure regulator. we like got on our first night in the RV, and we got to Arizona from California, and we hooked up our water, and it blasted out all the seals, and we had water everywhere. So we didn't do a whole lot of like research before we started going. So by the time we went full time, we kind of had worked out the kinks, and the RV that we got felt like a palace compared to our little 27-foot. And so I think for us, like an aha moment, I guess, was when we had gone back and forth across the country a couple times, and we started talking to our kids about like places that they had gone or things that we would see in books, and they're like, I've been there and I've been there and I've seen this. And so I know that's a sentiment that a lot of RV families echo, and so that's been really neat for us. So I think that was kind of when we knew, like, yeah, this is a pretty good lifestyle. We're pretty happy with it. We have an older rig, and so we have had a lot of stuff that's like broken, but thankfully, like, I'm pretty handy and Cam's super handy. So we've had a lot of like we've had a lot of like water damage going on in our rig. But all in all, we're pretty happy with it. We really don't have a lot of debt. And so it's been a nice it's been pretty good for us.
I'm still blown away on that number for your mortgage or your rental payments, not even mortgage payments. That just,
It was a lot to be, it was a lot to be, we were not treated very well. To put it nicely, we were treated very poorly by our landlord, and we had a lot of stuff wrong with the house. Like, we had no heater for a long time, and it was a struggle. And like with any rental, it's hard to get things fixed, but when you're paying so much, it was super frustrating. We enjoy the freedom to be able to be like, you know what, let's go to Palm Springs, or let's just decide to go up to Idaho, or things like that. So we've really enjoyed the flexibility, and I think being able to just up and go. And I'm fortunate that my husband has a job where he works remotely. As long as we have internet, we can pretty much just go.
which is awesome. And then you still have your house with you. So you have the consistency and you have all the things of home, of comfort with you. That's my favorite with living in this tiny space is if we go, 100 miles that way, I still have all the same stuff with me.
You have all your same I love that. Like, I like to have all my stuff. We're like turtles. Just bring it with us. Our favorite part of RV life has been getting to like kind of hang out with locals, and getting to see places that we thought we would love that maybe we didn't love so much, or places that we didn't think we would love that were like, this place is awesome. So one of those places for us was, we really liked Minnesota. We never planned to go there. Montana was like our bucket list. We wanted to go to Montana, and we didn't love Montana. Montana was fine, but we got to Minnesota, and we were like, the people were wonderful, and it was beautiful, and we just had a really good time there. So some states that would not have maybe normally been on our list, our kids and us we had a really good time.
Isn't that interesting? Because so many speak to the destination spots, the hot spots, or the top of the list places like Montana, and then they dream of living there and staying there. But then it was a little bit of a lunch bag letdown, I guess. But then nobody speaks of Kansas, Minnesota, places like that. And then you get there and it's better than you expected. For us, Kansas was a little bit better than we were expecting. Everybody just kept saying it was flat grassland, and I thought it was very pretty.
We felt like that about Oklahoma. We stayed in East Oklahoma with some friends a couple years ago, and that was like, this place is awesome. Like, this is so cool. So not what I had pictured. So I'm from Connecticut, and my husband's from Southern Arizona. So we kind of are like we're from very different places.
So then on that note, if you guys are from totally different places, what would you say was his favorite spot to visit that I totally would move here? And what would yours be?
We liked Idaho. So he really, I think, enjoyed Idaho the most. We had wanted to go to northern Idaho, but we didn't get that far. But I don't know that I'd want to be there in the winter. Like, we have some family in Idaho, and it is beautiful, but man, I look at my son's in college in Idaho right now, and he is loving it. But I look at his temperatures in the morning, and I'm like, it's 5 degrees, it's -1. And I'm like, absolutely not. And he's like, I'm in a t-shirt having a Five Guys milkshake, but he seems to enjoy it. I have to say, like, our kids sometimes have no idea where we've been. they'll be like, where was this? And I'll tell them the state and they're like, we haven't been there. I'm like, we have been all of these places. Or they don't know where something is. And we think that's so funny because I'm like, you've been there. You were right there. Like,
That's so funny. That's almost like because they all mesh together. We went to all these cool places, but I don't know which was which. As they get older, they'll look back and remember and know they went to see all these cool things in the learning ages of their life. When you look back before making this change, you probably had some fears and concerns. What were some of them, and how did you face them or get through them before jumping into RV life?
so we had more of like mechanical concerns, like what happens if the car dies and what happens if, we have major mechanical stuff. And I think pretty much everything that we've worried about has happened. Like we've replaced more tires and we've had bent axles before. And I think it's kind of taught us that you can worry about the things, but you really can't do anything about it. Like worrying isn't going to fix it. Worrying is not going to, I guess, like lessen the blow of a tire blowout or something like that. But it does teach you to be more vigilant on, I guess, having a savings account. Like I will say, we had a healthy savings account before we started this, and I can't even imagine like how we would have traveled. Not so much stationary, but when we're doing the road warrior stuff and you're out there and you have to have a backup plan, like it's your house that you're dragging behind you. When it breaks, you have, especially with a big family, you have to have somewhere to go. So we've had a lot of limitations. Like, for example, when our van died, we were about 2 hours from our campground. We were at the Alamo, and we usually take two vehicles everywhere we go, but we had taken all one vehicle just to go sightsee. And we found out that we could not rent a car. We needed to get back to our campground to get our truck to come and get the rest of us. We couldn't even rent a van. There were no vans available. We called rental places, we called Uber. There was nothing that was able to take both of us. So we've had some like weird little things happen like that I think are like a big family, kind of unique to a big family. Like we don't all fit in one hotel room. So those were things that when we talked about like the RV breaking or not being able to be in the RV or just things like that, it kind of taught us to be like two steps ahead of any mechanical failure or anything that could potentially go wrong. Instead of just being like, oh, I'm worried about this happening or what if this happens? You're like, okay, what are we going to do when this happens? And it kind of has taken the fear and the worry out of this lifestyle because there's so many unknowns. Things do break a lot.
What has this done for your marriage?
It's been, I don't know, it's been fine. Like it wasn't really an adjustment for us because my husband had been working from home for a while. We just had more space. Sometimes it's stressful though, because when he's working, when we had everyone in homeschool, sometimes I think the only time that we ever had any kind of, I don't want to say drama, but the times where it was really challenging was when we were having like bad weather outside and he had to have meetings inside because sometimes like, for work meetings, they're long. They're really long. Like there's like 5-hour meetings, Zoom meetings, and we can't be in the camper because he's on a meeting and our kids have no sense of being quiet. It's really loud. We have to go. So we'd always have to like, for a while, we had to like get out and go drive somewhere and find somewhere to go and kill time. So sometimes that was difficult because we'd have to do it at the drop of a hat. Like, I'm getting on a meeting right now. You got to get out. Everybody out. We've enjoyed it. So we haven't really felt like it's actually RV life is easier for us, like for the reason I said before with the house, like sort of like an open concept house, except much smaller, where you can sit on the couch and you can kind of see all areas at once. So for us, especially with our little boys, it makes it a lot easier. We have just like you do, like we have a bedroom with a TV in it. So at night we can just kind of go in and you have like your own space and chill out. And in our little travel trailer, we probably would have actually killed each other because we didn't have a designated like bedroom area. It was just like the fold out. So that was rough. There's no privacy at all. We would not have made it. Sometimes I feel like if there's a major problem or something happens at a really inconvenient time, like we have right now, we have one of our toilets needs to be replaced. And so sometimes like a big leak or a big problem or something breaks and it's like a really inopportune time, like you're dealing with other things. And I feel like just like with a house or anything else, those kind of make your not tempers run high, but it grates on you. We're pretty easygoing. No real conflict there.
I think that helps a lot when you're just relaxed people in the first place. You don't get very high strung. This life is definitely for you then.
We laugh a lot. We make fun of our problems a lot. So I think having a good sense of humor. We have a lot of kids and we're loud, and there's a lot of, especially with like older kids. I think when our kids were little, it was much easier because they're, happy to just have a milkshake or some toys. But like when you get into having teenagers, there's a lot of big feelings there in a very small space. And especially because the kids are in one room. And even though they do have their own bed, I think sometimes they have more conflict with each other than like we have conflict with each other, or they have conflict with us. And I think that's just any family dynamic, whether you're in a tiny space or a big space. It's just lots of people and lots of big feelings.
They're pushed to learn to deal with this right away because they can't just go, oh, throw my hands up and go to our own separate space on the opposite sides of the house, right? If you're in a house versus here, you kind of have to work through it and you have to deal with it. You have to learn how to control your emotions quicker.
They do make up quick. They'll be like yelling at it. You stole my pants. And then 10 minutes later, they're singing karaoke together. And I'm like, okay, I guess y'all worked it out. But they do. They learned conflict resolution really quick.
Yes. They're like Jekyll and Hyde kids.
It is a little bit.
Besties 1 minute, arguing the next, and then they're besties again.
That's been fun I think for all of us. Like for the season we're in right now, it's been nice to have to give everybody a little break. Everybody needed a little break. And that's good for people. I think for our kids, they've gotten really good at, I think RV kids are just like this. Like you get really good at change and being adaptable and making new friends. Like if I were a child, I know like I had the same school all the way K through 12, same friends. But for me, if I were to start a new school mid-school year, grade 8 or grade 6, I would have been terrified. And our kids, they didn't care. They did not care at all. They're totally fine. They're happy, made some friends. I feel like that's been one really positive thing about RV life is like it teaches you to get unstuck. You don't get stuck in your routine because you don't really get to have a routine. You become very flexible and good at making new friends and being outgoing. Or for our kids, they have been.
I know for me, I was a grade 6 mover. We moved March break of my grade 6 year, and that stunk. But we lived in the same spot my whole life until then. This whole journey of being in an RV, yours especially, sounds like there's been a lot of highs and lows. What are one or two of the biggest lows that you guys faced since you started this RV life?
When we first bought our rig, we were so excited to just find one that like fit all of us. And we did inspect it, but we inspected it, but probably not like we would have had we done a long search and been buying a new one. It was such a unique floor plan and it was so close by us that we jumped on it. So the night that we got our rig, we started looking at like the specs on our fifth wheel versus the specs on our travel trailer. So our rig is a lemon. And when I say a lemon, I mean from the factory, the wrong axles were put on our rig. So our rig is 12,500 pounds and it's riding on two 6,000 pound axles. And we only have 1,000 pounds cargo carrying capacity. The first night we had gotten it, so we're in it for the first night and we're like reading with horror, like, what did we do? Because there's nothing in it. We're already overweight for the axles. And I guess when this rig was manufactured, and I don't know enough about buying them new, when these were initially made, they did put the wrong axles on them. And if you had bought one, I guess Forest River immediately like fixed what they were doing and started putting them on the correct 7,000 pound axles. And so if you had bought one of these new back in 2012, you could have brought it back to the factory and had it repaired with the right axles, but this one didn't. And so since it was already 10 years old, we were like, well, what do we do? Can we replace the axles? And so long story short, we cried. I cried. There was crying. I was so upset. I'm like, I don't know what we're going to do. We're going to be overweight from the very beginning. But the way that we solved that was we already had two vehicles. So we went and bought a cargo trailer and the cargo trailer can hold like 1,700 pounds or something like that. So we were like, well, if we can't fit it in the rig, we'll put it in the cargo trailer. So that was actually such a huge blessing in disguise, because we are able to carry so much more and don't really have to worry so much about the weight of our rig. Like, we're able to have, we have our kayaks in there, and we have 8 bikes and a lot of, extra like tools and things that we probably wouldn't have been able to have otherwise. And so since then, we took out a lot of weight. Like, we took out cabinets, and just from having kind of slowly remodeled the rig, we've taken a lot of weight out. But that was probably our lowest point, was when we had spent the money and we paid cash for ours, to kind of get home with it and realize we've made a terrible mistake and bought a lemon. What have we done? So that was a real low point. But luckily it was short-lived. And knock on wood, it's been fine. We never replaced the axles, but we did beef up the tires and we did bend an axle. But other than that, it's been okay.
So then what's been your biggest high throughout all of this?
That's a good question. Last year, the way that we went across the country is we were able to experience spring absolutely everywhere. We had spring in Florida, and we had spring in Texas with all the flowers, and then we had spring in California, and then we started to go more north, and we got to have spring in Utah and spring in Idaho. And so that was really fun. We kind of had this long extended spring with months and months of flowers. So that was kind of a moment for us, that we were like, wow, we finally have kind of found our groove. We know what we're doing. We're not, because I do feel like it takes you a little while to sort of figure out like where you can stay and how you can do it. Just things that you learn to navigate, like navigating campgrounds or navigating boondocking and navigating the routes that you take. And so this was the first time that I felt like, even though we did have some mechanical problems, like having to buy a whole nother van, I feel like we had kind of hit our stride, and were able to like go to the places that we actually really wanted to see. Because our first time that we went across the country was during the pandemic, and so like we went to Four Corners and it was closed. So there was a lot of stuff that we weren't able to see the first time around. So this was actually like a refreshing change for us. Everything was open, so that was nice.
So exciting to just constantly follow spring all the way through. And like you said, follow all the flowers. That means everything is fresh and new everywhere you went. So what does the future look like for you guys?
I think we're going to keep RVing. I think our plan for right now is, we're probably, because the market's not great, we're going to rent our house in North Carolina. So we don't have to, it's vacant at the moment. So we're going to rent our house, and then we'll probably stay California residents. And I don't know if we'll keep our annual spot, but our plan for right now is to travel during the summer, and probably come back to our stationary spot in California for the winter. Maybe Florida, but probably California. So travel and stationary, but still full time in our camper. So we'd love to go back to Idaho in the summer. If we could just go anywhere, we would probably spend our summers in Idaho. But this year we have to go deal with our house. So back to North Carolina we go.
So the future is to continue RVing. Do you think you'll continue RVing indefinitely?
I think so. I don't know. I think at some point we'd probably like to buy a house, but I think what we have learned through RVing and then buying a huge house is that we don't really want or need as much space as we thought we did. So even though it's kind of, I feel like a lot of people are inclined to think you need huge bedrooms and walk-in closets and, a really big house. We had a huge house in California, then we did the RV, and then we bought a huge house in North Carolina. Everybody still congregated on one tiny couch, and like we all still ended up only in one room. So I feel like it changes your family and that it makes you closer. Like nobody went to their own corners. Everybody was still just in the one little tiny place.
Isn't that amazing? Just the total behavioral shift from living in such a small space. You'd think you'd want to get there and everybody would just sprawl right out. And it's the exact opposite. You're so used to being on top of each other. Let's just keep being on top of each other. If you did settle down, where do you think you would go?
We would probably settle down in Southern California or maybe Arizona. My husband's from Arizona, and we've spent a lot of our time there. We lived there for a long time. So probably Arizona or California, maybe the South. But as we're kind of limited by where our boys can get the best services, and it seems like California, Arizona are the best for them. So a lot of our future plans are look more like, where can we get them what they need to have.
Their needs definitely have to come first.
Our two identical boys of our triplet set have autism, so our girl is neurotypical, but the two boys are autistic, and they're somewhat low functioning. I don't want to say, like, Benny is much more low functioning than Henry is, and Benny's almost totally nonverbal, and Henry's a little bit verbal, but not really. But they need like constant supervision, 24/7 supervision. There's no time where they can be unsupervised. And so that's a huge challenge for us when we're RVing. So when we're traveling around and we're just like exploring, it's fine. But when you add in homeschool to the mix, it gets really hard, especially because the boys do need constant supervision. And so there's no, like, I always see people with these idyllic homeschool setups where, the kids are just sitting together at a table and they're working and the little ones are doing puzzles, but we don't have that kind of dynamic because because of the boys, we can't even spread out papers or pens or pencils because they'll come and like break the pens or rip the papers or break the laptops. So we have to like cordon off the school kids, but also watch the boys. So it's a challenge for us to be able to homeschool. And we did it for a long time and it was okay. But it's like that extra level of challenge where I need to be 4 different people, but I'm only the one person. So this has been a nice break for everybody. I think a lot of people think we're crazy. I think just the RV life in general, people think you're crazy. I'm sure you can probably relate to that. Like, it does come with some judgment. And sometimes it's like, maybe you're right. But then we get to go and like, see the Tetons out our window or travel or go do something, or even just being stationary. But we're somewhere really nice and warm right now for the winter. So even though it's not Florida, that's okay, but it's still warm. We don't have feet of snow. It's been nice to be able to have that freedom. We had a lot of things fall into place to be able to make it work.
The whole purpose of this podcast is to inspire other people to live outside of the box, which is what you guys are doing. So how would you inspire others? What advice would you give to encourage them to live outside the box?
I think being willing to make a drastic change, even though the people around you don't necessarily see that as being the right path for you. We did talk to a lot of people before we did this, and they were like, that's insane. You cannot live with that many people in an RV, but it just felt right. And even though no one else could see it for a long time, and people probably thought we were crazy, friends and family, but it's really proven to be a good choice for us. So I would say, just follow your gut and don't be scared of making those changes, because if you're waiting for the right time, it's never going to be the right time. You just do it. And if it turns out badly, it turns out badly, but you've still done it. But it might not turn out badly. It might turn out fantastic and better than you ever thought it could be. So just do it. There's a guy across from us right now, and I won't turn my camera around, but he is doing like car camping, like full-time car camping. And I just keep watching him, and it's like he's working at his computer outside. And I think, well, I find that to be so inspiring because, you could wait until you could afford the $150,000 van, or you could wait until you have a vehicle that could tow a camper, or you can just, load up your stuff and just go and just get in your car and go and see the things that you want to see. And I personally find that to be really inspiring, because I wish that when I was 20, someone had told me, you can just go. Like, you don't have to wait for things to be right. You can just go. It's right there. Just go to it. Go see it.
That is really good advice, because so many will wait for all the stars to align, or wait till they have that perfect truck, that perfect RV, that perfect van. Like the guy across the street, you don't need it. You don't even need to buy new. You guys bought used and fixed it up, because they just see the Instagrams of, I have the newest, latest, and greatest, and that's what you need to hit the road.
I'm so glad that we did not ever go into debt for our rig. Like, when things break, it stings so much less. We were worried because everyone had told us about like the 10-year rule. And we have only encountered that maybe once or twice. Like, when your rig is older than 10 years, you're not allowed in certain RV parks. But fortunately for us, we don't really fit into that kind of RV park anyway, so that's not been an issue. But I know that was something that when we bought our rig, because it was almost 10 years old at the time, we were really, really worried about like, we're buying an older rig, like, are we not going to be able to camp? But we haven't experienced that. It was a good choice for us. So, but we kind of flipped our way up to our camper. So we started with like eradicating bed bugs from our first camper. It was so bad. They were using the bathtub as like a litter box. It was full of bed bugs. They had in 4 years never ever dumped the black tank. It was a nightmare. There was so like you could not, it was so bad. It was so bad. It was so bad. So there were some tears and some serious elbow grease involved in fixing that first camper. And I always see people that do like a flip in 3 months or a flip, and it didn't. It took us an entire year of working till like 3 o'clock in the morning and then getting up the next day to do kids and then put the kids to bed and work in it again.
I'm still stuck on the black tank not being drained.
So we brought it to the first time we used it, we had like stopped at a dump station, and this particular dump station had an attendant, and I'll spare you the details, but it was like the most compacted you could ever imagine. And so we realized after the fact that they had not, where we bought it, the person we bought it from had never taken it. They had no way to move it. So they had just, it was like parked in someone's yard. They had let their niece live in it, but it was fine. We cleaned it and it was fine.
It was fine. It's fine.
It was really, really gross. But I
Yes.
feel like some things just take effort. I was super stubborn. I was very stubborn. Like I bought that thing and everybody was like, it's not going to make it out there. And I was like, it is going to make it. So there was I'm definitely not backing down from this.
That's fair enough. You're not backing down. So you had a point to prove.
I think so. And we did it. We made it. Made it the whole way.
You totally did. Oh my goodness. You're going to have to send me some pictures. I want to see that one.
I do have some pictures on my Instagram and on my TikTok of like
Okay.
the before and after, and it doesn't even like show how bad the smell was. It was terrible. It was so bad.
Oh my goodness. That's crazy. Okay, so I'm totally going to put some pictures on the show notes page so people can see the before. They can go to your Instagram and see the after, but I want to share the before. 'Cause that just blows my mind.
Not for the faint of heart.
Your stubbornness paid off.
Hard work and stubbornness.
So where along this journey was somewhere that you felt, wow, this is the life. This is amazing. This is where we were meant to be.
I felt like that when we went to Glacier National Park, because that was something that we had wanted to go to Yellowstone, and we did go. We actually went to Yellowstone like 2 days prior to the flooding, which was kind of crazy because we were supposed to go back on the day that it like had flooded. So I was really glad that we were there on that day. But we went a couple days before that and we were going to go back, but ended up not going. But Glacier for us, I felt like that was a scary trip for us because I'm like, it felt, I don't know, for some reason, it just felt so far. Like Yellowstone's, you're still kind of like in civilization. And I don't know, we went to the east side of Glacier. So we didn't go to the like Kalispell side. We went to the east side, but that was something for us that it was further than we had initially planned to go, but we had already made it all the way to, I don't remember. It was on the east side. But anyway, we had gotten that far and we were like, well, we can head east or we can just go for it. And we just went for it. And we kind of had looked at like, do we want a boondock? Do we want an RV park? And that was just a trip that we hadn't really planned out that well in advance, but we just went for it. That was something that like, you look at people that go to Glacier and they hike and they hike and they hike. And for us, we don't really get to do that kind of thing because of our boys. So we were like, you know what, we're just going to go anyway. And we kind of just did the car route and we drove and, got out and looked around. But that for us was like, wow. Like I had never in my life seen anything like that. I was not prepared I was prepared to be like, it's just okay. But it was really like blew my mind. And I thought if we weren't doing this, I never thought in my whole life I would ever get to go up there. We didn't see very much. Like, we didn't do the going to the Sun Road, and we didn't see the west side of Glacier. We just kind of on a whim just drove straight north. So we did East Glacier, and we did St. Mary and Many Glacier, and we stayed in Chouteau. So Chouteau is about an hour east of Glacier. It's more on the plains. And we stayed at like a great little RV park with the nicest people and full hookup, and we flew kites, and it was just perfect. It was just perfect. So sometimes things just seem really intimidating. Like, how could I ever get there? But you just go. And then you get there and you're like, wow, why was I so intimidated by this?
Why did I wait so long?
Why did I wait so long to do this? You might not have tomorrow to be able to go. And that's kind of why we keep doing it, is because you might not be able to afford to travel, or your financial situation might change, or the job situation might change, or just anything could change. Your health situation could change. So if you're able to go and go do something, just go and do it. Even if it doesn't have to be Glacier, just go somewhere, go do something, see something awesome.
Tingly feeling that's so exciting, exploring somewhere new, because that's when the travel bug bites you. And I think once you've been bitten by the travel bug, you can't let it go. I don't know anybody who's ever traveled and explored and then said, no, I'm good. And I don't need to see anymore.
It definitely does kind of creep in on you. And I think for us, had like the house situation worked out for us, we probably would have just traveled part-time. But I think sometimes you have to go down the wrong road to know that it was the wrong one. Like, you can always wonder, but if you don't take that wrong path, you will never know, like, okay, this is definitely not what we're supposed to be doing. And that was kind of how the house felt for us. Like, we loved getting to be near family. And even though all signs pointed for us to do that, when it really came down to it, it just wasn't really working out. One step at a time, take the next step. And for us, that was come back out to California. So that's where we're at. I just want to add one other thing.
Yeah.
So one thing that I've noticed, that when we look at a lot of full-time RV accounts, and this was something that for me made me almost not want to do it. So there's a lot of like emphasis, I think, in like just the travel community in general, on like free range parenting and homeschooling. And I feel like if you don't feel like you fit in that box where, you're off on hikes every single day and your little kids are running way up ahead of you, or you're getting to climb mountains and do all these outdoorsy things, then you don't necessarily fit into that community. Like, well, that's not really us, so maybe we shouldn't really be out there doing that. But there are a lot of other people that are traveling more like we're traveling, where we're not super, we do like to be outdoors, but we're not super outdoorsy, and like going on big long hikes with our boys is not necessarily something that we can do. But I feel like it's important to just get out there and do the things that you are able to do. Like, so for us, we might not have been able to go on a hike, but we still drove to where we could have a viewing area, and we got out and walked around and we took pictures and we read all the plaques. So I feel like if your journey doesn't look necessarily like you're not doing epic things and mountain climbing with your kids, or, your kids aren't able to go stand up paddle boarding on, some lake while you sit around the campfire, just do it anyway. And then find your tribe and find the people that are doing what you're doing.
That is probably the best add-on, because it's so true. For us, I struggled with this at the beginning because, like you, we have someone who couldn't even ride a bike when we left. And while this experience has given him so much more freedom to make mistakes and trial and error, and not feel like he's put on display as different from his peers, he has learned to ride a bike since. But yeah, he's not going to be stand-up paddleboarding. Yeah, we don't travel like the big Instagram accounts do, which is where I struggled of, well, what content do I share? What value do I have in this RV world? Because we don't do all the crazy exploring things. My goodness, we went to do Zion, and the only trail that was open that we could go do was the Watchman Trail. Well, Kieran has a tick that makes me nervous with him walking up, cliff sides and edges. And even though it's not even cliffside or edges, there's still a good a couple arms length before the outside, but there's other people going up with their toddlers up this crazy mountain pass. I'm like, well, we can't do that. We're not that family who can do that climb. And then I felt bad because now I'm not sharing this content because we didn't do the whole climb. We did a quarter of it, but that's where our comfort level is with the abilities that are in our household. So I didn't share it at all.
No, I totally get that. And it does feel that way. It's almost like if you're not like our boys, if we let go of them, they're gone. Like if we were to go hiking in the woods and they got out of our hands or they were off their wrist leash, they would take off into the woods and we would not know where they went. They don't respond to their name. They would not come back. So for us, while free range parenting, that sounds great. We can't do that. They have to be physically attached to a caregiver at all times, especially if we're somewhere like, a cliffside, or like sometimes I'll see people that have little kids that are just standing at the edge of the water and they're like throwing rocks in. And I think our boys would run. They would run directly into the ocean, run directly into a lake. But it's hard to share those moments because it doesn't seem Instagram worthy. Your kid attached to a backpack leash or a wrist leash, or you get so much hate for that. And I feel like that's something about social media that needs to change. Like if you don't have a moment that seems, well, we didn't do the epic hike, it's like, okay, well, I guess I can't really share that. And I feel like that's something that needs to change because there are more families, especially with kids on the spectrum, that want to do this lifestyle that just feel like I just can't because my child would run out the door or my child would elope or drown, or how do I get those services if we're traveling? So I think seeing that more and willing to share that is more help than it is a hindrance to others. So I'm glad you're doing this podcast.
What advice would you give parents who want to make this leap? They have, the RV, they have the truck, they have the means to get out there and do it, but are worried about traveling with kids on the spectrum or with any sort of special needs.
I would say start by knowing where you're going and how long you're going to be gone, and if that impacts your healthcare or your services. If that's not an issue, or you have like nationwide healthcare and your kids are currently receiving services like ABA, talk to your providers and see if you can do things virtually. There's an Instagram account that I follow that does a really good job of this, which is Accessible Adventures, and they travel part-time, but they go for really long times in their RV, but they do have to come back because their son has high medical needs. And so it doesn't have to be all or nothing. You can be more than a weekender, but not full time. And so if you're not completely ready to make that huge leap into full time, just maybe start by going for longer trips. Do a 2-week trip, do a 3-week trip, and just see how that feels and kind of, ease your way into it. But also, don't be afraid to talk to your providers and see like, how do you think they would do if we went for longer periods of time or if we went full time? Where your kids are on the spectrum too. Some are much higher functioning and have less needs than others. But just because you do have a kiddo on the spectrum, like don't count yourself out for being able to do it. You definitely can. You just have to look at what you need and what your child needs and not be afraid to like just get out there.
For your kids, how have you seen this way of living help them?
I think our boys have been able to see and do things that they definitely would not have been able to do had they been just in school and just in services only. And this is kind of a double-edged sword because for us, at the time that we left, they weren't receiving services anyway because everything was completely shut down. School was shut down, therapy was shut down, so they were already getting nothing. And so we figured while they're getting nothing, we might as well just travel. But I think they've gotten much better with being in public settings like festivals or new surroundings that are unfamiliar to them, going from the desert to mountains to the beach, just different environments. And I think that's really good for them as far as like, I don't want to say like desensitizing them, but they're more adaptable with different landscapes. They're not freaked out by super cold or snow, and they're not freaked out by really hot, dry desert. They're just much more easygoing. And it's been a real blessing to be able to say, like, we took our boys to the Tetons, or we took them to one of the places that we had the most fun with them is we went to in Austin. They have a place called Zilker Park, and it is like a natural spring public swimming area. And they have lifeguards there and a springboard dive. And that was something that was so neat for us to be able to just take them to go to this natural spring. And they never would have been able to go do that had we just sat at home doing 5 hours a day of ABA therapy. So I think there's a place for making sure the services are being met, and it's so important. But there's also like, don't be afraid to they're just kids, and kids still just want to go and have fun. So that's my 2 cents worth on that. It's been a benefit to them to have the same routines all the time. They're able to be watched a little bit better than when we were in our house. It got really challenging for us with them in the house because they kind of get wild when there's a big open space, and they do, them personally, they do better in a smaller space. For us, they tend to like settle down more and focus, whereas like a bigger environment, they tend to get a little bit nuts, like they don't know how to slow down and just sit. There's just too many places to go, and they want to like go around all of it, around the perimeter and up the stairwell and on the lights. But this is kind of like, this doesn't change, and it's very small, so they tend to chill out a little bit more, and we spend more, it forces us to spend more time outside. And I'm very indoorsy. Like on a Saturday where we're, normally in our house, we would have just all gone and done our own things, or maybe done yard work or messed with the garage or done like a house chore. The chores finish up quick. And so it kind of, you can sit around in the rig and do nothing, or it forces you to get outside and explore or swim or just go somewhere that you haven't been before. So that's been a real benefit to us. It kind of has forced us to get outside more.
So if anybody is looking to find you or connect with you, how can they get in touch with you? Where can they find you?
I'm on Instagram, and I have a fledgling TikTok. It's very small, but Instagram. And I have, I guess, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok.
Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Okay, I will put those in the show notes, and if anybody's looking for them, they can connect through there. I just want to thank you for coming here today and sharing your story. I really appreciate it, and I think there's so much advice in there for people just getting out there or thinking about it, and then especially for those who have special kids like we do. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for taking the time to talk to me.
Thank you for listening. If you're enjoying these stories, please leave us a review, as it helps our podcast reach more listeners. For more information about this podcast, with show notes, links, and more, please go to our website, moresunsetsplease.com. While you're there, let's get connected. We post often on our Instagram and Facebook and share weekly updates through email. Make sure you join the list. But we want to hear from you. If you know of someone with a great story, send an email to info@moresunsetsplease.com, and I'll be sure to get back to you. Until next time, keep taking time to enjoy more sunsets, please.